I was holding a $2 million car key fob over a storm drain when I realized something. This tech bro had absolutely no idea I owned the building he was standing in. Let me back up 6 minutes. 6 a.m. The Meridian Business Campus in downtown Austin, Texas. That perfect silence before the chaos of ambition takes over. I was kneeling in the east courtyard, checking the irrigation system around the heritage oak trees my father planted 30 years ago, the same trees that would still be standing long after today's billion-dollar disruptors were forgotten. I was in full disguise, utility vest, work gloves caked with soil, hair tied back in a messy bun. To anyone passing by, I looked like maintenance. And honestly, that's exactly how I preferred it. You learn more about people when they don't know who you are. You learn what they're really made of when they think you're beneath them. But I should have known the peace wouldn't last. In commercial real estate, there's always some entitled genius about to ruin your morning. And this one was driving a car worth more than my first 3 investment properties combined. 6:47 a.m. The scream of a V12 engine ripped through the morning air like a chainsaw through silk. I looked up just in time to see it, a matte black Pagani Huayra, limited edition, maybe one of 100 in existence. The kind of car that doesn't just turn heads, it stops traffic. It actually drifted, into the parking space directly in front of the main entrance. My parking space. The one with the brass plaque that read, Reserved, Sterling Management. The door flew open, and out stumbled Julian Thorne. I'd seen his face in the tenant directory, CEO of Apex Neural, the AI startup that had taken over the entire 8th floor 6 months ago after a hostile takeover. He was younger than I expected, maybe 32, wearing a Tom Ford suit that probably cost $6,000 and a Patek Philippe watch that cost 60 times that. His hair was gelled into submission, and he had that look. You know the one. The look of someone who's never been told no in his entire privileged life. He didn't even glance at me as he yanked open the passenger door, pulling out a garment bag and laptop case. He was yelling into his AirPods, something about final deck approval and closing the Series C by end of day. Then he saw me. Or rather, he saw someone he assumed was the help. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit that like button, because what happens next is absolutely wild. Hey, he shouted, jogging toward me with the frantic energy of someone who thinks the world revolves around his schedule. Hey. You. I stood up slowly, brushing the dirt off my knees. Can I help you? He shoved his key fob into my gloved hand, literally pressed it into my palm like I was a coat rack, not a person. The valet stand was empty. I'm late for the biggest launch of my career, and I don't have time for this level of incompetence. I looked down at the key fob. Pagani logo. Carbon fiber inlay. This thing probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I need you to detail the interior, he continued, not even waiting for my response. Check the tire pressure, it should be exactly 32 psi cold. Park it in the shade on the east side, away from any trees. Bird droppings, you know. He made a disgusted face. And if there's even a fingerprint on that carbon fiber when I come back down, I'll make sure you're reassigned to cleaning the parking garage with a toothbrush. Are we clear? I stared at him. Really stared. Took in the entitlement radiating off him like heat shimmer off summer asphalt. This building was all I had left of my father. He'd poured his life into it, planted every tree, chosen every fixture. And this man, this boy playing dress-up in a borrowed suit, thought he could park his ego in my father's legacy and talk to me like I was garbage. Understood, he repeated, snapping his fingers in my face like I was a dog that hadn't responded to a command. Crystal clear, I said softly. Too softly. Good. Finally. He turned and sprinted toward the entrance, already screaming into his phone again, tell the board I'm 90 seconds out. Have the presentation queued. And someone get me an espresso that doesn't taste like dishwater. I watched him disappear through the revolving doors. Then I looked down at the key fob in my hand. Then I looked at the brass plaque, reserved, Sterling Management. Then I looked at the storm drain, about 3 feet to my left, with its perfectly spaced metal grate. My father used to say, Rose, sometimes the universe gives you a gift. It's rude not to accept it. I walked over to the drain, held the key fob directly over the opening, and let my fingers relax. Plop. The sound of $2 million worth of Italian engineering keys hitting 6 inches of standing water. Beautiful. Hope you kept the spare, Julian, I whispered to the morning air. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this is just the beginning, and Julian Thorne has no idea who he just messed with. I smiled, peeled off my work gloves, and headed inside. I had an empire to run. A lease to review. And in about 3 hours, Julian was going to stand in front of 200 investors and claim he owned my building to inflate his company's valuation. That key drop? That was just the appetizer. By the time his billion-dollar launch was over, Julian Thorne was going to learn a lesson they don't teach at Stanford Business School. Never mistake the landlord for the help. The elevator ride to my penthouse office on the 23rd floor gave me exactly 90 seconds to shift gears. I peeled off my work gloves, pulled the hair tie from my bun, and let my hair fall loose. By the time those doors opened, I wasn't the maintenance worker anymore. I was Rose Sterling, owner of a $40 million commercial property in downtown Austin, Texas. My office overlooks the entire city. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides, the kind of view that reminds you every morning why you fight so hard to keep what's yours. I poured myself a coffee, black, no sugar, and pulled up the digital lease file for Apex Neural on my computer. Aegis Dynamics had been a dream tenant for 7 years before Julian's hostile takeover. They paid on time, respected the building, treated the staff like human beings. Then 6 months ago, Julian Thorne swept in with his Series B funding and his disruptive vision, bought out the founders, and turned the entire 8th floor into his personal Silicon Valley fantasy camp. Since then? 3 noise complaints from the floor below. 2 incidents of after-hours construction without permits. And according to my bookkeeper, they were 90 days behind on their common area maintenance fees. That's the money that pays for the lobby, the elevators, the security that keeps this building running. 90 days. That's not an oversight. That's a pattern. I scrolled through the lease agreement, looking for my leverage. Article 9, no unauthorized structural modifications. Article 14, the distraint clause's failure to pay CAM fees gives the landlord the right to seize property as collateral. Article 22, misrepresentation of property ownership constitutes material breach. If you've ever dealt with an entitled boss or coworker, drop a comment below. I want to hear your stories, because trust me, it gets so much better. I closed my laptop and made a decision. If Julian Thorne wanted to treat my property like his personal playground, then I needed to see exactly what he'd been doing up there. Time to go undercover. I changed into a different uniform, navy blue coveralls with Meridian Maintenance embroidered on the back, clipboard in hand, tool belt around my waist. I've worn this disguise before. It's amazing what people will say and do when they think you're invisible. The 8th floor was chaos. The moment the elevator doors opened, I was hit with a wall of heat. It had to be at least 95 degrees. The air was thick, oppressive, like walking into a server farm in the middle of summer. Which, as it turned out, was exactly what Julian had created. I walked past rows of desks where exhausted 20-somethings stared at monitors, headphones on, hoodies up despite the sweltering temperature. Nobody looked up. Nobody made eye contact. The vibe was pure dystopia, the kind of hustle culture that grinds people into dust and calls it innovation. I made my way toward the break room, checking vents along the way. That's when I noticed it. Someone had physically bypassed the building's climate control system. Removed the regulators. Rerouted the airflow directly to a sealed room at the end of the hall. The server room. I made a note on my clipboard, unauthorized HVAC modification. Article 9 violation. Fire hazard. In the break room, I found her. A young woman, maybe 26, sitting alone at a table with her head in her hands. Her shoulders were shaking. Next to her, a Starbucks cup was overturned, cold latte still dripping off the wall onto the floor. "You okay?" I asked gently. She looked up, startled, and quickly wiped her eyes. "I'm fine. Sorry. I'll clean that up." "Don't worry about the wall," I said, setting down my clipboard. "Worry about you." "What happened?" She hesitated, then the words came tumbling out like a dam breaking. "I'm Julian's executive assistant. Chloe." She laughed bitterly. "Executive assistant. That's a fancy way of saying I'm his punching bag." He threw that latte at the wall because the font on his presentation slide was Helvetica instead of Gotham. Screamed at me in front of the entire engineering team. Told me I was aggressively mediocre and that I should be grateful he hasn't fired me yet. I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "How long have you been working for him?" 8 months. Ever since he took over." Chloe's voice was shaking. "It wasn't like this before. Aegis was normal. We had lives. We went home at 6. But Julian? He thinks sleep is for the weak. He once sent me a Slack message at 3 in the morning asking why I wasn't online. When I didn't respond within 10 minutes, he docked my pay." "That's illegal," I said quietly. "I know." She wiped her eyes again. "But everyone here is on H-1B visas or stock options that haven't vested yet. We can't leave. We're trapped. And he knows it." I felt something cold settle in my chest. This wasn't just about unpaid fees or unauthorized construction anymore. This was about power, the kind of power that lets someone torture people because they can. Smash that subscribe button if you think entitled bosses like Julian need to be taken down, because what I'm about to do next is legendary. "Chloe," I said carefully, "what's Julian launching today?" "It's called Apex Sentinel. It's supposed to revolutionize cybersecurity with AI-powered threat detection. We've been working 100-hour weeks for 6 months to get it ready." She glanced toward the door, then leaned in closer. "But between you and me? Half the code doesn't work. The whole thing is smoke and mirrors. Julian's just trying to close a Series C funding round, $200 million. The investors are flying in from New York, San Francisco, Seattle. He's been telling them we're ahead of schedule and that the tech is flawless." "Is it?" "Not even close. But he's betting that if he can dazzle them with a flashy presentation, they'll sign the term sheet before anyone looks under the hood." I pulled a business card from my pocket, plain white, just a phone number and an email address. "If you ever need help," I said, sliding it across the table, "call me. Anytime." She picked up the card, confused. "Your maintenance?" "Something like that." Chloe stared at me for a long moment, then reached into her messenger bag. "You seem like someone who knows what to do with information." She pulled out a flash drive and pressed it into my hand. "This is Julian's investor pitch deck. The one he's presenting in 3 hours." I looked down at the drive. "What's on it?" "Page 47, she whispered. "He claims Apex Neural owns this building. Says it's part of our strategic real estate portfolio to make the company valuation look bigger. It's complete fiction, but the investors don't know that. Fraudulent misrepresentation of property ownership. Article 22. I closed my hand around the flash drive. "Thank you, Chloe." She nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "I just want him to pay for what he's done to us." I stood up, grabbed my clipboard, and headed for the door. "Don't worry," I said over my shoulder. "He will." Back in my office, I plugged Chloe's flash drive into my laptop. The file opened immediately, 138 slides of venture capital fantasy. Glossy graphics, hockey stick growth projections, Buzzwords like paradigm shifting and exponential scalability. I scrolled to page 47. There it was, in bold letters, Strategic Real Estate Assets, the Meridian Business Campus, Apex Neural Headquarters. Valued at $40 million. Below that, a photo of my building with a caption, owned and operated by Apex Neural since 2024. I actually laughed out loud. The audacity. The sheer, breathtaking arrogance of it. Julian Thorne was about to tell 200 investors that he owned my father's legacy. I picked up my phone and made 3 calls. The first call was to Marcus Webb, my forensic accountant. Marcus is 63 years old, built like a linebacker, and has the personality of a particularly aggressive audit. He spent 20 years with the IRS before going private, and he can smell financial fraud the way sharks smell blood. Marcus, I need you at the Meridian in 30 minutes, I said. Bring the full lease agreement for Apex Neural and every invoice we've sent them in the last 6 months. What are we looking for? Proof of default. Article 14. Common area maintenance fees. I could hear him smile through the phone. Rose, you know I love it when you talk contract law to me. The second call was to Fire Marshal Patricia Holbrook. Patricia and I went to college together at UT Austin. She's saved my property from code violations more times than I can count, and she takes building safety more seriously than most people take their wedding vows. Patricia, I need an emergency inspection of the 8th floor at the Meridian. Today. What's the violation? Unauthorized HVAC modifications. They've bypassed the climate control system to overcool a server room. The rest of the floor is running at 95 degrees. If those servers overheat and catch fire, we're looking at a catastrophic event in a 40-story building. There was a pause. I'll be there in 20 minutes with a full inspection team. The third call was to my attorney, David Chen. David is a shark in a Brooks Brothers suit. He specializes in commercial real estate litigation, and his favorite hobby is making overconfident CEOs cry. David, I'm invoking Article 14 of the Apex Neural Lease. Distraint Clause. I want authorization to seize company property as collateral for unpaid fees. How much are they behind? $92,000. 3 months of CAM fees plus late penalties. Do you have documentation? Marcus is bringing everything. Then you're within your rights. I'll draft the seizure order. What property are we targeting? I looked out my window at the matte black Pagani sitting in my reserved parking spot. Let's start with the car. If you're loving this revenge story, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what you would do to Julian, because I'm just getting started. 30 minutes later, my office looked like a war room. Marcus had spread out 6 months of financial records across my conference table. Every invoice, every reminder notice, every certified letter we'd sent to Apex Neural requesting payment. All ignored. Article 14 is crystal clear, Marcus said, tapping the lease agreement. Failure to pay common area maintenance fees for more than 60 days constitutes material breach. You have the legal right to seize assets up to the value of the debt plus penalties. How much are we talking? I asked. $92,000 in unpaid fees. Another $15,000 in late penalties. Call it $107,000 total. I smiled. And what's a limited edition Pagani Huayra worth? $2.3 million, give or take. Sounds like sufficient collateral to me. Patricia arrived with her inspection team at 10:15 a.m. I watched from my office window as they entered the building, clipboards and thermal cameras in hand. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Rose, this is worse than you described. Patricia's voice was tight with controlled fury. They've removed safety regulators, rerouted ductwork, and overclocked server equipment beyond manufacturer specifications. The ambient temperature in that server room is 140 degrees. One electrical short and this entire floor becomes an inferno. Can you shut it down? I'm issuing an immediate cease and desist on all server operations until they restore the building's HVAC system to code. And I'm fining them $50,000 for each day of non-compliance, retroactive to when the modifications were made. I did the math in my head. 6 months of violations. That's $9 million. Send me the report, I said. I'll need it for the board meeting. At 11 a.m., Julian finally came looking for his car. I was in the courtyard, inspecting the heritage oaks again, when I heard him shouting. Where is my car? Where is the valet who took my keys? I stood up slowly, brushing dirt off my coveralls. Julian stormed toward me, face red, veins bulging in his neck. You. I told you to park my Pagani. Where is it? I looked at him with the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you hold all the cards. The storm drain took your keys, Julian, I said quietly. Perhaps you should learn to fish. His eyes bulged. Do you have any idea who I am? I'm about to close the biggest funding round in Austin history. I will sue you into poverty. I will have you arrested. I will. You'll what? I interrupted. Have my job? I pulled off my work gloves, one finger at a time. Here's the thing, Julian. I don't work for you. I started walking toward the building entrance. I work for me. Because my name is Rose Sterling. And you're standing in my building. I left him there, frozen, finally understanding what he'd done. The launch was in 3 hours. Time to prepare the grand finale. By 2 p.m., the Meridian's lobby had been transformed into something out of a tech conference fever dream. Julian's team had erected a massive stage against the north wall, complete with LED screens, professional lighting, and a sound system that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. Camera crews from TechCrunch, VentureBeat, and Bloomberg were setting up their equipment. Catering staff circulated with champagne and overpriced hors d'oeuvres. And everywhere, were the investors. I recognized faces from the Silicon Valley elite. Partners from Sequoia Capital. Executives from Andreessen Horowitz. A senior VP from Goldman Sachs. They milled around in their Patagonia vests and limited edition sneakers, clutching iPads and talking in hushed tones about market disruption and unicorn potential. 200 people, all gathered to watch Julian Thorne promise them the future. I stood in the back of the lobby, wearing a tailored charcoal suit now, watching the controlled chaos. My phone buzzed. A text from David Chen, seizure order approved. Tow truck en route. ETA 1445. Perfect timing. Drop a like if you can't wait to see what happens next, because this is where everything comes crashing down. At 2:30 p.m., Julian took the stage. He'd changed into a black turtleneck, because of course he had. The Steve Jobs cosplay was complete. His confidence had returned now that he was in his element, microphone in hand, spotlight on his face. This was his kingdom. Or so he thought. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice echoing through the marble lobby. Thank you for being here today. What you're about to witness is nothing short of revolutionary. The LED screens behind him blazed to life with the Apex Neural logo, a stylized brain wrapped in circuit patterns. For too long, cybersecurity has been reactive. Defensive. Weak. He paced the stage like a TED Talk performer. But what if we could predict threats before they happen? What if AI could think like a hacker, but fight like a guardian? The crowd murmured appreciatively. I saw someone from Sequoia nod. That's what Apex Sentinel does. And we built it here, he gestured grandly at the building around us, in our headquarters, the Meridian Business Campus, which Apex Neural acquired as part of our strategic growth plan. I felt my jaw clench. There it was. The lie. Spoken with such casual confidence that half the room was probably already believing it. Julian advanced to his next slide. Our valuation model accounts for not just our intellectual property, but our physical assets. That's when I heard it. The low rumble of a diesel engine. Through the 30-foot floor-to-ceiling windows that made up the entire south wall of the lobby, the windows that Julian had specifically chosen as his backdrop for their dramatic effect, a massive flatbed tow truck rolled into view. At first, nobody noticed. Julian was too focused on his pitch, the investors too focused on their iPads. But I noticed. The truck positioned itself directly behind the stage, perfectly framed by those enormous windows. The driver, a man named Lou who I'd worked with before, climbed out and began unwrapping the heavy-duty chains. Our projected revenue for Q4 alone, Julian continued. The hydraulic system engaged with a loud hiss that echoed through the lobby. Several heads turned. Lou attached the chains to the Pagani's frame with efficient, practiced movements. The metallic clink-clink-clink of steel on carbon fiber was picked up by Julian's microphone. Now everyone was looking. What the Julian stopped mid-sentence, following the crowd's gaze. The flatbed's hydraulics groaned. The Pagani's front wheels lifted off the pavement. Stop. Julian screamed into the microphone, the sound system amplifying his panic. Stop. That's my car. The investors watched in stunned silence as the $2 million supercar rose into the air like a trophy being hoisted. Julian dropped the microphone, it hit the stage with a deafening thud, and ran toward the windows, banging on the glass. Stop. You can't do this. I'll call the police. Lou gave him a friendly wave and climbed back into the truck. That's when I walked onto the stage. I picked up the fallen microphone, and the sound of my heels clicking against the wood echoed through the dead-silent lobby. Actually, Julian, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room, I can do this. I pulled the seizure order from my jacket pocket and held it up for the cameras. I'm Rose Sterling. I own this building. And according to Article 14 of your lease agreement, which you're currently in violation of, I have the legal right to seize assets as collateral for $92,000 in unpaid fees. Julian's face went from red to white in about 3 seconds. You're not the valet, he whispered. No, Julian, I said, looking directly into the Bloomberg camera. I'm the landlord. The tow truck drove away, the Pagani secured on its bed, disappearing down the street. And you're in default. The silence in that lobby was deafening. 200 of the most powerful investors in the country stood frozen, champagne glasses halfway to their lips, watching Julian Thorne's entire world collapse in real time. The Bloomberg reporter was frantically typing on her phone. The TechCrunch cameras were still rolling. Someone from Sequoia Capital was already heading toward the exit. Julian's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. You can't. I'm in the middle of a presentation. No, I said calmly, still holding the microphone. You were in the middle of committing fraud. I gestured to the LED screen behind us, where his pitch deck was still displayed. Page 47 of your investor presentation claims that Apex Neural owns the Meridian Business Campus. That this building is part of your strategic real estate portfolio. That's a lie, Julian. And you told it to secure funding you don't deserve. I pulled out a remote from my pocket and clicked. The screen changed to show the actual building deed, my father's signature from 1995, the transfer to my name in 2019, and the current property records showing Sterling Management as the sole owner. This is fraud. Misrepresentation. And it's a material breach of your lease agreement under Article 22. The Goldman Sachs executive stood up and walked out without a word. 3 others followed. If you think Julian is getting what he deserves, smash that subscribe button, because we're not done yet. Julian lunged toward me, face twisted with rage, but 2 security guards, my security guards, stepped between us. You're insane, he screamed. Do you know how much money you just cost me? I'll destroy you. I'll sue you for everything you have. You'll do nothing, I interrupted, my voice cutting through his tantrum like a blade. Because in approximately 5 minutes, you're going to be in a boardroom upstairs explaining to your investors why you lied to them. And then you're going to explain to the fire marshal why you've been operating an illegal server farm that violates 6 different safety codes. His face went pale. What are you talking about? The 8th floor, Julian. You bypassed the building's climate control system. Removed safety regulators. Created a fire hazard that put every person in this building at risk. Also, you could overclock your servers and pretend your AI was more powerful than it actually is. I nodded to Patricia Holbrook, who was standing near the elevator with her inspection team. Fire Marshal Holbrook has issued a cease and desist on all your operations until you restore the HVAC system to code. The fines are $50,000 per day, retroactive to 6 months ago. That's $9 million, Julian. Plus the $107,000 you owe me in unpaid fees. The remaining color drained from his face. Oh, and one more thing. I clicked the remote again. The screen changed to show a series of Slack messages, screenshots from Chloe's flash drive. Messages where Julian called his employees disposable, where he bragged about underpaying H-1B workers because they can't quit, where he mocked someone for taking a sick day to attend their mother's funeral. The room's energy shifted from shock to disgust. This, I said quietly, is who you put your money behind. 30 minutes later, I sat in the boardroom on the 15th floor. Julian was there, flanked by his 3 remaining board members, the ones who hadn't immediately fled the building. His lawyer sat beside him, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Across the table sat representatives from the investment firms, their faces carved from stone. David Chin sat to my right, a stack of legal documents in front of him. Marcus was on my left with his forensic accounting reports. Let's make this simple, I said, sliding a folder across the table to the lead board member, a gray-haired woman named Victoria Reeves from an early-stage fund in San Francisco. These are the building code violations, the unpaid fees, the fraudulent investor claims, and documented evidence of labor law violations including wage theft and workplace harassment. Victoria opened the folder. Her expression darkened with every page. You have 2 options, I continued. Option 1, fire Julian Thorne immediately, for cause. No severance, no golden parachute. You issue a public statement taking responsibility for the misrepresentations in today's pitch. You pay all outstanding fees and fines. You restore the HVAC system to code within 72 hours. And you comply with a full third-party audit of your employment practices. And option 2? Victoria asked quietly. I lock the doors. I seize every server, every computer, every piece of equipment in that 8th floor office as collateral. I file criminal complaints for fraud and building code violations. And I personally ensure that every journalist who was in that lobby today gets the full story, with receipts. Julian shot to his feet. You can't do this. I built this company. You built nothing, I said, my voice like ice. You bought a company that other people built. You terrorized the employees. You lied to investors. You treated my property like your personal playground. And you thought you could get away with it because you've never faced consequences in your entire life. I stood up, gathering my documents. Well, Julian. Welcome to consequences. Victoria looked at the other board members. They had a whispered conversation lasting maybe 30 seconds. We'll take option 1, Victoria said. She turned to Julian. Mr. Thorne, you're terminated for cause, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. You have 1 hour to collect your personal belongings. Julian's face went through every stage of grief in 5 seconds. You can't. I have stock options. I have. You have nothing, Victoria said coldly. Your options were contingent on remaining CEO. That contract is void. Comment below if you've ever wanted to see a bully get exactly what they deserve, because this is what justice looks like. 2 weeks later, I was back in the courtyard at sunrise. The heritage oaks had been properly irrigated. The 8th floor had been restored to code. Apex Neural, now under new leadership, had paid every penny of their fines and fees. Chloe had been promoted to Director of Operations with a significant raise. She'd also filed a formal complaint with the Department of Labor, and 3 other former employees had come forward with their own stories. Julian? Last I heard, he was facing multiple lawsuits and had moved back to San Jose to explore new opportunities. Translation: no one would hire him. The Pagani sat in an impound lot for exactly 14 days before Julian's lawyer finally paid the fees to get it released. I heard he sold it 3 days later. Probably needed the money for legal bills. I knelt down next to the largest of the heritage oaks, the one my father planted the day I was born. I pressed my palm against the bark. "You were right, Dad," I whispered. "Power isn't about whose car is the loudest. It's about whose name is on the deed." A breeze rustled through the leaves. The morning sun broke over the Austin skyline, painting the meridian in gold. I stood up, brushed the dirt off my knees, and headed inside. I had an empire to run. And this time, everyone knew exactly who was running it. If you loved this story of revenge and justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment telling me about a time you stood up to someone who underestimated you. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, check out the playlist in the description. Thanks for watching, and remember, never underestimate the person you think is beneath you. They might just own the ground you're standing on.